Hello and welcome to this special edition of Strait Talk from the TRT World Forum in Istanbul, where power, politics, and policy collide. I'm Yusuf Aram, and join me as I sit down with some of the leading minds and insiders, bringing you the voices redefining the Middle East and its place in a changing world. Since October 2023, Israel's war on Gaza threatened to upend the Middle East. This year, the war spilled across multiple borders. Israel's strikes on Syria, Iran, Qatar, and Yemen redefined the region's balance of power and its limits. A fragile ceasefire in Gaza may have silenced the guns for now, but not the grievances. The Palestinian question remains unresolved. Washington's influence is shifting under Trump's renewed push to shape the region. Turkey is also recalibrating its role, balancing diplomacy, defense, and leadership across the Muslim world. As old alliances fray and new ones emerge, the struggle for the region's future is far from over. And it's against this backdrop of shifting power and fragile truces that the TRT World Forum convenes here in Istanbul. Leaders, academics, and policymakers from around the world have gathered to debate exactly these issues. The theme this year, the Global Reset, looks at how old alliances are breaking down, new ones are emerging, and what this means for the future of the Middle East and beyond. I sat down with Waddah Khanfar, the former Director General of Al Jazeera and President of the Al-Sharq Forum. With a career spanning the Arab Spring and the rise of digital media, Khanfar brings a unique perspective on how power is shifting across the Middle East and beyond. We explored how media, diplomacy, and narrative control are shaping this global reset, and what it means for the future of the old world order. Waddah, I've been following you for a long time, and you're like a Wikipedia of the region, so I'm very, very happy to have you here. And I want to talk a little about where the Middle East is going. You have, obviously, the Gaza issue right now. I mean, just terrible what's going on there. You have Israel striking almost every one of its neighbors. The Arab Spring had closed out. It looked like there was a moment of peace, almost, and now where we are. How do you view the current conjecture right now? How can we get out of it?
So I always say that we have been going through lack of stability, uncertainty for the last 100 years. Simply after the First World War until now, this region is going through vacuum. This region has not seen stability, not because the people of the region do not want to see that, but because the structure that was actually enforced on this region has failed to produce that kind of stability or prosperity. This is why we're going through the civil wars, confrontation, and so on. The latest of that was the Israeli action in the region, because that is a continuity again of what has happened before. So Israel was planted in this part of the world in a way where it has, in its formation, there is an existential fear of collapse, because it does not belong to the region. It doesn't feel that it is part of this region, and therefore always it is behaving in a way which is not rational, and to a large extent it is very aggressive. And that attitude has become much more dangerous during the last few years. And in my opinion, that trend is not going soon to shift or to change. So Israel will continue to be destabilizer in the region, and therefore the agreement that you refer to and the moment of peace that we thought eventually that Gaza war has stopped. I do believe the war did not stop. Maybe the Israelis are trying to redefine the rules so they could use their force any moment they do, under the banner that they are trying to protect themselves and so on. And the war against the Lebanese or the Syrians or maybe the Iranians is not over yet. So it is too early to say that this episode, the latest episode of long series of destabilization in the region, has come to an end.
You know, I mean, one of the things that always surprises me is the complete disunity in the Arab world. I mean, during the Arab Spring, the fragmentation, even on an issue that brings together the public in the Arab world, like Gaza, there's fragmentation on how to deal with Israel, how to deter Israel, how to support the Palestinians. It reminds me of an answer. I was in Jordan a couple months ago. I asked the former crown prince the same question. I mean, I asked him, how can the Arab world unite? He said, very interesting answer. Yusuf, we've been fighting since the day the prophet, peace be upon him, closed his eyes. When have we united? This is a perpetual state kind of. Do you agree with that? And what will it take to see some real unity, especially on these types of critical issues?
So let me say this. There are normal differences, and this region has known that for centuries, which is normal. People have their own ambitions, dynasties fight against each other, that's normal. But what is not normal during the last 100 years is the formation of the modern state in this region. This modern state is a departure from the norm. Why? Because for 1,300 years prior to that, this region was part of something grand structure, which used to be called the Ummah, the Khilafah, whatever it is. And that consensus in politics was actually deeply rooted because the system itself produced certain kind of common sense. Now, during the last 100 years, the newly established nation states in this part of the world, most of them have failed to gain legitimacy or to deliver to the population what people expect from them. And this is why this region feels weak. This is why the Arab world, for example, feels weak in front of the Israelis, while the Arab world is much more, the population is bigger, the wealth is huge, and it is vast, and it has depth in the Islamic world, depth in Africa and many other parts of the world. But the architecture that was designed by the colonial powers has led us to be paralyzed almost in front of the Israelis. Now, is that going to shift soon? In my opinion, the Israeli behavior and the way that they are going beyond certain boundaries and the way that they lack total sense of rationality, the brutality of their war machine is pushing people to reconsider the way that they view Israel. Don't forget that the trend in this region for the last 20, 30 years is not pro-Israel in one sense, because always they see the Israelis are becoming destabilizer in the region. And in my opinion, if you think about Turkey, for example, Turkey did not see Israel as a threat to its national security 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. But today, the Syrians, the issue of Syria has become, the boundary of the sphere of influence of Turkey and the attempt of the Israelis to separate or to dismantle Syria. Their movements in many parts of this region, it will contradict eventually what Turkey sees itself to be. And therefore, for the first time, I could say that now Israel is becoming a national threat, a security national threat to Turkey. And, of course, to Iran, which is another major country in the region. So, basically, Israel, as some people thought it might exist, like Israel with Ishaq Rabin, Israel with Shimon Peres, does not exist anymore. We are in front of the new entity. It has projected the worst that anyone could think of, and therefore, I don't think anyone could trust Israel or could think of normalizing with a state which is committing genocide, and at the same time, it is going beyond any kind of norm or any kind of behavior that the previous, Israel used to have in this region.
That's interesting that you said that. I was planning on shifting to Syria, but that's interesting. So are you saying the post-October 7th Israel now has nothing to do with the Israel beforehand? That book is closed, and now we have a new Israel, new ambitions that the region has to deal with. And if that is the case, how can the region deal with it? Is it going to be a deterrence mechanism, some type of collective defense, as the Egyptian foreign minister had presented at the Doha summit?
So, just to make it clear, I do believe that Israel, from the first day of its inception, has a problem. And that's the existential problem, because it doesn't see itself part of the region. And that fear within Israel is becoming right now, expressing itself in a very brutal way. And Israel used to think that they could deal with countries in the region, and some countries in the region thought that they could deal with Israel through peace agreements, for example, from Camp David to Wadi Araba agreements to many other agreements. Right now, that is, to me, is very far from happening. Why? Because eventually Israel has projected itself in a way which cannot be trusted by anyone as a partner in this process, which, in my opinion, anyway, it was not going anywhere. It has nothing to do with the Palestinians, by the way. It has to do with countries in the region trying to adjust their relationship with the Americans and their relationship in the region. So the issue of Palestine continues and proved to be the center of the change in this region. So whatever agreement was done between countries in the region and Israel is actually hitting an end. Why? Because the Israelis are denying the Palestinians their rights, and the Israelis are going beyond any kind of logic in their fight, and they are committing genocide and destroying people. So this is one. Second, and this is also important, this region until now is dismantled. I mean, is very partitioned. So the concept of coming together is new, and I see that as a trend. Why? Not only because of the behavior of the Israelis, but also because the decline of the American power in the world, and the rise of China, and the concept which start to develop in the minds of the decision makers in this part of the world and the global South in general, that the Western-centric world order is not anymore as it used to be, and therefore we should look at other ways to make ourselves immune. And that is, in my opinion, very healthy, because any regional agreement, any regional communication could encourage states to be much more, let us say, stable, and also have confidence to behave a little bit far from the Western-dominated recipe of what they should do things.
Who's the alternative to America as a security provider? Is it going to be Russia? Is it going to be China? The Turks? We saw Saudi Arabia sign a bilateral pact with Pakistan. Is Pakistan the answer?
What I feel is that the region itself in the Middle East will start thinking of a regional order whereby they could trust each other a little bit more. Because don't forget that this region has a lot of lack of trust amongst states.
A lot of animosity.
And a lot of animosity.
And a deep-rooted animosity,
so what
too.
we could see, what we have seen between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan might become a beginning of something whereby Turkey could join. Maybe in the future, other countries like Egypt and Turkey could have much stronger relationship with each other. And I think I could see it happening right now. I see the relationship between Turkey and the Gulf states, Turkey and Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Egypt, and other countries with each other, and Pakistan and Indonesia.
After the Arab Spring, there was that normalization, obviously, between Turkey and the Gulf states. But has that normalization now matured to the point where we could see a bilateral defense pact with the other Gulf states and Turkey? I mean, obviously, Turkey and Qatar are very close friends, but could we see Turkey and the UAE, Turkey Bahrain, Turkey Saudi Arabia move forward? And also the relationship between Egypt and Turkey, could that get back on track? Because I feel like that's kind of the critical relationship, especially from a security perspective. Is that the future? Is that the key for the region?
I would say it is happening. I think right now, as we speak, we are witnessing new agreements. We are witnessing defense agreements regarding weapons and factories being established and shared maybe interests being developed slowly between Turkey and Egypt, Turkey and Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the Gulf states. I think this is new. It has just happened maybe during the last 1 year or so. And that's important to witness. Maybe it is not as fast as you or me would like to see, but I think the international shift in the world order and the regional destabilization, especially with the Israeli action against Syria and Lebanon, and of course in Gaza and in Iran, is pushing countries to become close to each other and becoming much more reliant on developing their own mechanisms than attracting the Americans to do the job on their behalf.
So where does Iran fit into all this? I mean, obviously, much of the Gulf views Iran as the major threat. The Turks view Iran as a regional competitor, a competitor in Iraq, a competitor in Syria, a competitor in Lebanon. Where do you see Iran? Will it continue to be a threat for the region, or has the Israel-Iran skirmish kind of changed the view of these countries, changed the view towards Iran of these countries?
I do believe that Iran today is less dangerous, between two brackets. I mean, or viewed as less dangerous by countries in the Gulf states and by Turkey. Why? Because simply Iran is not as strong as it used to be. But also, these countries see the danger of pushing Iran to the brink of collapse or a regime change, simply because Iran is a huge country, it's a huge player, it's a historical entity in this part of the world, one of the major components for the last few thousand years, the Persian civilization and so on and so forth. So if Iran start to collapse, or the regime, the Americans or the Israelis try to change the regime, then there is a serious danger in this region that destabilization could spill over. And then, yes, Turkey might see Iran as a competitor when it comes to their sphere of influence. But definitely Turkey doesn't want to see a failed state in Iran.
Oh, I think that's the last point anyone wants to see.
No one in the Gulf would like to see that. So I would say the agenda of the Americans and the Israelis in Iran is not exactly the same like the agenda of the Turks or the Arabs. In my opinion, Iran should become much more close to the Arab world and to the Turks in an architecture that could preserve the balance of power amongst the players and secure everyone's interest based on respect and also based on not using any kind of sectarian or any kind of maybe ideological push in order to control.
How important is the success of Syria to the region in the next 10 years? I mean, you have this new administration now in Damascus. Obviously, huge rebuilding, hundreds of billions of dollars probably in rebuilding in at least a minimum a decade. How important is it for Shara to be successful? How do you view his performance so far, his 1 year performance? And also, how do you view his approach to Israel? Because there's been a lot of provocations, over 800 strikes, zero retaliation. He's saying, I don't want anything to do with you guys. He's like, I have rebuilding to do.
So let us say this. Syria is very central in the Middle East. Syria is very important country in this part of the world. And if Syria collapses or partitioned, then we are going to have major geopolitical earthquake in this part of the world. Now, the current administration in Syria tried to approach the Israelis in a way where they presented themselves as, they don't form a threat against the Israelis. But the Israelis are not buying this. The Israeli logic is as following. If Syria is weak at this moment in time, should I allow it to become strong? Or should I proceed to weaken it more, partition it, and convert it into something that in the future might not form any threat against me? So they are not looking at the discourse of the government of Syria. They are looking at long time strategy. And in my opinion, they are making a major mistake there. Because also Israel, when it is going to have a country like Syria partitioned, which means civil wars and confrontations, this becomes a zone of confrontation that Israel itself is going to suffer from. So I think the Israelis at this moment in time, not only lacking rational thinking about the region and behaving in a way which is going really to lead to a major clash and backlash against themselves, but also they might push regional actors in the region, including Turkey, and one of them is Turkey. One important part in Turkey, in Syria, to consolidate the region in Syria and to empower the Syrians to unite. And I think most of the region would like Syria to be united and to be stable, because no one would like to see Syria again going through that kind of episode of violence.
When you look at the collective region over the next decade, as a futurist, let's look into the future. For you, what's your biggest concern? This issue really concerns me over the next 10 years. This can turn into a major flashpoint. And also, what are you most optimistic on?
So the thing that I am really worried about is that the anger and the frustration that you described in the minds and hearts of the Arabs at this moment in time, which is building up, not only because of Gaza. Gaza is one of the most important ones, but also because the failure of most of the states in the region to prescribe to the people certain kind of hopeful future and to give them some assurances about their dignity, about their power sharing, or even about delivering goods to the public. In my opinion, that is building up, and that might turn in a moment of time into a major popular rejection of the current regimes. Now, the point is, what is next? Because with social media and with the rise of young people who are unemployed and people who are angry because of major conditions, they feel humiliated, they feel marginalized. Now, what should be the future? Now, this is number one. Second, is the current architecture in the Arab world without proper integration, and this answers the second half of your question, without proper integration, is any country in the region on its own capable of achieving prosperity and stability? Or should we start thinking about some new model where integration, economic integration, and many other forms of integration could prescribe to us the future of this region, as the European Union did, as ASEAN are doing, as many other parts of the world is doing? The concept of every state behaving on its own to preserve what is seen as its national security without taking into consideration a regional framework and taking into consideration that this architecture, which has been for 100 years failing regularly, should be reviewed, and the new way of thinking should emerge, and the new generation that is not happy with the current reality embraces this, and when change happens for a strategic reason.
I think, though, the major issue with what you said, it sounds beautiful, but I think the major issue is who's going to lead. Who's going to lead?
So that's
a major issue.
Yeah.
Are the Turks going to lead? Are the Saudis going to lead? Are the Egyptians going to lead? Is someone from another country going to lead? Because I think that's always going to be the major issue. And inside of that vision, is it the Arab world plus Turkey, or is Turkey part of that vision that you have?
I don't.
What's that role?
Lately, I started to notice something important in the region. Before, the Arab world used to feel that Turkey is a neighbor. Some countries don't like Turkey to be involved in the Arab issues. And I remember the Arab League used to take a lot of decisions against Turkey, especially in Libya and many other parts. With Gaza, I feel Turkey is becoming closer to the Arab world. I'm not talking here about people, because people have their own opinion. I think the Arab world the Arab people do not have a problem with Turkey, and the Turkish people do not have. I'm speaking about government, centers of power. I think right now, from centers of power point of view, Turkey could play a good role. And at that moment, it is not about who is going to lead. It's about what kind of a framework that could assure everyone that they are partners in it. And therefore, the concept of powerful and weak is not going to determine the hierarchy in the region. I do believe that this collective thinking of integration and new architecture for power could secure everyone, and everyone could feel comfortable to be part of it. And they think that they're not going to be marginalized in the future.
Waddah, thank you for a fascinating conversation. I mean, TRT World Forum, the theme is Great Reset. Maybe the Middle East is getting ready for its own reset. Thanks for joining me. You've been watching a very special episode of Strait Talk from the TRT World Forum. My name is Yusuf Aram. See you at another episode.